Venezuela recalls its ambassador to Guyana for consultations as the border dispute between the two nations escalates over an offshore oil find made by ExxonMobil. And plus, Greece's new finance minister, Euclid Sakalotos, attempts to ease the negotiations with the country's creditors. 1 year since Israel's protective edge offensive on Gaza that killed more than 2,000 Palestinians, there's still not much hope for Gazans that their inhumane living conditions will end. And good Tuesday morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. To begin, we start here in Venezuela. That's where the country has recalled its ambassador to Guyana for consultations as the border dispute between the two nations escalates. Now, this comes after a significant offshore oil find made by Exxon. President Nicolas Maduro also says he will reduce the size of the embassy in Guyana. The struggle comes from a territorial dispute from 1899 over the Essequibo region, which both countries claim as their own. ExxonMobil reported a major oil discovery in those waters after being given unilateral permission to explore the region through an agreement with Guyana. Venezuela considered that agreement a violation and called for a dialogue between the two nations. The region comprises 2/3 of Guyana's entire territory.
ExxonMobil is behind this operation and the petroleum lobby, which has a decisive influence on the Pentagon and all the imperial plans of the United States.
Next door now, several high-ranking military leaders in Colombia have been replaced more than a week after a report revealed some military chiefs were involved in extrajudicial executions known as false positives. Now, the report stated that numerous generals and colonels knew about these extrajudicial killings that took place systematically between 2002 and 2008. Former President Alvaro Uribe had also dismissed 27 military personnel related to the false positive scandal. And in Ecuador now, Pope Francis was welcomed Monday by thousands of worshipers as he arrived in the country's largest city of Guayaquil. He offered a mass for around 250,000 people in Samanes Park, where he preached about the importance of family. He's offering another mass Tuesday at the Bicentenario Park in the capital of Quito. Then he will resume his trip to Bolivia and Paraguay. This is the first time the Pope has returned to Spanish-speaking South America since his election to the Vatican. We go to Mexico. In Mexico City, neighborhood activists are organizing to halt what they say is uncontrolled urban development and mega projects, which they argue will only benefit a small few rather than the majority of the population. Our correspondent Clayton Kahn now with the details.
It is increasingly more common to see massive urban development projects like these in the Mexican capital. While the authorities affirm that the boom is a sign of progress, many residents complain that it is to benefit just a few.
I dare to say that the real estate groups are made powerful by the city's planning and are fundamentally oriented towards developing the best conditions for a business plan, so as to maximize their profits through the city and land use.
Many projects are occurring in centrally located working class and historic neighborhoods where the local residents affirm that it is a push to gentrify their community.
The entire zone is becoming more expensive, and what is most notable is the expense of basic services. Water, rent are not inaccessible for most of us, neighbors who could pay for it before.
Meanwhile, other activists announced that there exists high degrees of corruption in the city's real estate boom and its corresponding public infrastructure projects. In 4 years alone, formal complaints against unlawful land use changes has jumped by 264%, while many residents say their right to prior consultation for presumably public projects is not being applied.
We are the owners of our spaces, and now how is it possible that they do these kind of projects without citizens' consultation or referendum? Where do our decisions go? Who knows better the urban phenomena in our neighborhoods than those of us who have been here for a long time?
Recent changes in the city's housing and urban development laws, allowing for just a 12-person committee to approve changes in land use rather than pass a more participatory or democratic process, has prompted grassroots organizations to demand a stiff measure to what they say is uncontrolled urban development growth.
Due to the wave of mega projects that are occurring in different parts of the capital and the metropolitan area, we citizens expect from the corresponding authorities that there is a declaration of an urban moratorium.
Aside from the social and economic impacts of the city's urban development plans, activists argue that the projects produce serious negative impacts to the region's environment and natural resources, warning that there is simply not enough water for the city. Clayton Cantelosur, Mexico City.
Around the world, Euclid Tsakalotos was sworn in Monday as the new finance minister of Greece after the resignation of Yannis Varoufakis.
Tsakalotos, a 55-year-old leftist economist, has been appointed in Greece's bailout talks since April. He seems to be far less abrasive than Varoufakis, but no less determined to secure a deal compatible with the government's agenda. French President François Hollande and German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Monday the door was open for a return to debt negotiations, but called on Athens to make serious proposals. On the other hand, French Prime Minister Manuel Valls said that a Greek exit from the Eurozone will be too much of a risk.
France is convinced that we cannot take the risk of a Greek exit from the Eurozone. First of all, probably for economic reasons, even though they would be much less significant today than they were during the first Greek crisis 3 or 4 years ago, but mostly for political reasons. Europe is at stake.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Russia's Sergei Lavrov arrived for Iran nuclear talks in Vienna on Tuesday, the day the deadline for agreement is due. Iran, the US, and 5 other major powers missed the initial deadline on June 30th, but gave themselves 1 more week for a deal to restrain the Iranian nuclear program in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. In Kabul, a suicide car bomber had slammed into a convoy of foreign forces. Although it's still not clear whether there were any casualties, it is the second attack that targets the remaining foreign forces in the heavily fortified Afghanistan capital. Last week, a Taliban car bomber targeted a convoy of NATO troops, killing 1 civilian and wounding up to 12. 1 year has passed since Israel launched its deadliest, longest, and most destructive offensive on the Gaza Strip. Despite the ceasefire, there is little reason for Palestinians to believe their suffering will soon end, since none of the aid promised has arrived and Israel maintains a 9-year-old blockade that hampers the entrance of reconstruction material. Before the Protective Edge offensive, already 2/3 of the Gaza population depended on food assistance and more than 40% were unemployed. More than 2,000 Palestinians were killed in the 50-day offensive, 500 of them were children.
In Samoa now, hundreds of people have welcomed New Zealand's All Blacks in a parade. The 2 South Pacific countries will face each other at the Rugby World Cup on Wednesday. Now, except for the year 2007, when the All Blacks were booted out of the World Cup quarterfinals by France, the Kiwis have finished each year since 2004, ranked number 1 in the world.
The input was crazy, but this is even another step up. It's great to see the support.
And that's what we're covering on this Tuesday morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. We have plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Hope you have a great day.